On the boundless, desolate, frozen land, the cold and piercing wind swept across the earth, while the blue cold currents permeated every corner of the world. The fierce wind carried an icy chill, transforming the entire space into what felt like a dead zone in such a harsh environment. Even a supreme warrior who had reached the 6th or 7th grade would face disastrous consequences if they stayed for too long. However, in this brutal land, where the icy winds blew and cold currents flowed, a lean figure was steadily making its way from afar. The figure's steps were slow, each one seemingly consuming most of its strength. But despite the slow pace, the steps were firm, unwavering even under the onslaught of the raging winds. This figure, of course, was Chen, who had begun his physical body cultivation on the second layer of the body refining tower. Whooshed at a gust of wind carrying the blue cold current swept past him, his skin was immediately torn open, revealing deep, bone-exposed gashes, yet no blood flowed from the wound. Instead, a faint blue hue appeared in the torn flesh. Chen's body trembled slightly at this moment. The pain from the lacerated skin didn't concern him, for as the wound tore open, the blue cold current swiftly infiltrated, freezing his flesh almost instantly. The following pain felt as though his flesh was nearly rotting away. This pain was distinctly different from the scorching burn he had felt under the red light. It was as if countless needles were stabbing into his flesh, making him wish he could tear his flesh out to escape the agony. Chen's steps faltered for a moment, and his brows, tightly furrowed, relaxed slightly as the excruciating pain reached its peak. The piercing cold currents gradually dissipated. The blood-stained flesh, which had nearly died, began to revive. Chen could clearly feel that the revived flesh had grown even stronger than before. Feeling this change, Chen let out a sigh of relief that he couldn't help but let out a bitter smile. The cultivation of the physical body was incredibly difficult, and the pain was far more intense than cultivating spiritual energy. No wonder so many people preferred focusing on the latter. However, feeling his body growing stronger was an incredibly satisfying experience. Reassuring himself, Chen did not hesitate further. He continued to take steady steps forward. On the endless, desolate, frozen land, the young figure advanced step by step. As he moved, numerous jagged scars appeared on his body. Yet, he remained resolute, as if walking the path of an ascetic monk on earth, enduring pain to temper himself. Meanwhile, on the second layer of the body refining tower, the atmosphere outside grew somewhat strange, and this strangeness naturally stemmed from Chen. On the light screen displaying the second layer, Chen's position had once again fallen far behind the others. This scene left the powerful figures of all clans bewildered. If it had been earlier, they would have mocked him, but after the earlier shocking reversal, no one dared to think in that way anymore. Even Lu Qing refrained from mocking him. Though she wasn't broad-minded, she wasn't foolish either. She had already been slapped in the face by Chen once before, and if she did so again now, it would truly show that she had lost her mind. So, she merely stared at the trailing light point in confusion, her mouth moving several times before swallowing her words. She shot a fierce glance at Xun'er, silently cursing in her heart. She was certain that Chen had been reduced to his original state, and once Zhongtung entered the third layer, she would have her chance to humiliate Xun'er as revenge. Xun'er, brother Chen. Mo Ling's small face was filled with worry. Chen's fluctuating situation left her on edge. She knew Chen was full of tricks, but she still worried he might truly have been reduced to his original form. If that happened, the others here might ridicule them. Xun'er shook her head, her expression calm. Let's wait and see, he must have his reasons for doing this. She understood Chen all too well. After all, over the years, she had witnessed how this boy, who had once seemed so weak in her eyes, had caught up to her, and even surpassed her. So, she didn't believe that this ancient body refining pagoda could truly stop Chen. Time passed quickly under the watchful eyes of many powerful figures outside the body refining pagoda. However, this time, the majority of their attention wasn't on the bright spots in the front, but rather on the last one that was moving at a much slower pace. They clearly wanted to see if the person who had fallen behind before but managed to make a miraculous comeback, becoming the first to enter the second layer of the body refining pagoda, would pull off another jaw-dropping miracle. Was it luck before, or did he truly rely on his own abilities? Perhaps they would soon find out. The first echelon is approaching the second layer's barrier. As time passed, someone suddenly whispered. The crowd shuddered slightly, their gazes shifting. Sure enough, the bright spots in the front had begun to reach the barrier of the second layer. Breaking through the barrier would mean successfully entering the third layer. Chen still doesn't seem to be moving much. Someone noticed that Chen, who was at the very back, was still slow. This sight made some people's eyes flicker, and they started to question whether Chen's previous achievement had been the result of some special method, and if that method was failing this time. Chen couldn't help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief. She then shot a cold smile toward the distant Jiuyo. It seemed that the little brat's methods weren't working this time. However, Jiuyo didn't react to her gaze. She simply watched the scene with a calm expression. Kong Shan, Su Kuan, Zong Tong, Mo Feng, and the others have started to break through the barrier to the third layer. A cry of surprise soon rang out. The bright spots at the very front had charged into the barrier to the third layer, their speed rapidly slowing down, clearly encountering great resistance. Many strong figures were closely watching the few bright spots chasing each other. It looked like the first one to enter the third layer would likely be among them. As for the dark horse, Chen, it seemed he had lost all his luster, still far behind, flickering dimly. Half an hour passed quickly in the second layer. All the 9 prodigies, except for Chen, had gradually broken through the barrier to the second layer, finally crawling toward the end of the second layer at a very slow pace. Zong Tong and the others have entered the third layer. Suddenly, an exclamation broke the silence outside the tower. Everyone quickly looked up and indeed saw the glow of the third layer's barrier begin to manifest. Several bright spots charged in almost simultaneously, entering the third layer. Big brother Zong Tong entered the third layer. Chen was almost thrilled, her delicate face showing a hint of distortion. She immediately looked toward the second layer and saw that the bright spot there still showed no signs of movement. Jiuyo, looks like the last laugh isn't going to be yours. The frustration that had built up in Chen finally erupted. She sneered and looked at Jiuyo. However, Jiuyo remained calm, not paying much attention to Chen's smugness. She only focused on the still unmoving bright spot in the second layer. Mo Ling, standing beside them, gave Chen a sharp glare, clearly annoyed by her constant noise. She seemed to find her as bothersome as a crow. Looks like you haven't given up yet. Seeing Jiuyo's unwavering focus, Chen couldn't help but snort coldly. After this round of the body refining pagoda, she believed Jiuyo would soon learn what real defeat felt like. That kid had only passed the first layer through some mysterious method. After this, he would probably remain stuck in the second layer forever. A mere human, comparing himself to their heavenly rock clan's prodigies, was truly laughable. Outside the body refining pagoda, many gazes were filled with mixed emotions as they watched the last bright spot, some feeling regretful that this dark horse had indeed been nothing more than a flash in the pan. Meanwhile, Chen, the person at the center of all the discussions, remained completely unaware, standing on a lone peak in the frozen land. This lone peak is the only elevated ground in the second layer. When Chen arrived earlier, he happened to encounter it by chance. However, when he climbed to the summit, he was somewhat startled to discover that the area was surrounded by a dense blue cold current. The cold, sharp winds here had become even more violent than before. In the moment he first reached the top, if his physical body hadn't been strong enough, he likely would have been torn into pieces by the freezing air, leaving nothing but shredded flesh on the ground. However, after gradually enduring the inhuman pain, Chen realized that this place was exceptionally effective for tempering the physical body. Thus, he chose to stop moving forward and instead sat quietly on the peak, meditating. Whoosh, whoosh. Gale-like winds swept by, leaving deep, grotesque wounds on Chen's body. Yet, he only trembled for a moment before enduring the pain, then lifted his head and gazed far into the distance. He could sense that Zong Tong, Han Shan, and the others had probably already entered the third layer, but he wasn't in a hurry. He could feel that once he fully adapted to this place, his physical body would experience a significant improvement, bringing it extremely close to the second level of the dragon and phoenix body. Only then would he be ready to move forward. As the saying goes, the greatest accumulations lead to the greatest bursts. Let you all run ahead for a while. We'll meet again soon. The cold wind howled as the young figure sitting atop the peak seemed to smile lightly. Boom. This was a dim, stormy space, where thunder raged like silver snakes across the sky, flashing through dark clouds. The entire world seemed engulfed in a turbulent, violent aura. In this stormy space, several figures flew cautiously at low altitudes. Their bodies glowed with spiritual light as they constantly dodged the massive thunderbolts that came crashing down, looking somewhat disheveled. This was the third layer of the body refining tower. The flashes of light were none other than Xun'er, Han Shan, and the others, who had rushed into the third layer at the fastest speed. They had entered the third layer ahead of the others with the speed of the first echelon. However, after entering, their pace slowed significantly, clearly because the violent storms in this third layer were far more challenging than the previous two layers. Whenever a fierce thunderbolt descended, a golden feather would sweep out and deflect the lightning. While the stray lightning would still cause Xun'er's skin to sting, it was clearly insufficient to inflict any serious harm. This feather was a rare treasure from the Heavenly Rock clan, crafted from the golden feathers of the golden-winged rock. While it wasn't particularly strong offensively, its formidable protective power was enough to rival a supreme divine artifact. Clearly, Xun'er had prepared thoroughly to face the trials of the body refining tower. It seems that Kid has already been left far behind. As they moved forward, Xun'er glanced indifferently behind him. He still hadn't sensed any fluctuations in Mu Chen's spiritual energy, which meant that Mu Chen hadn't even passed the second layer. This made a mocking smile appear on Xun'er's lips. Mu Chen was quite interesting. Before, he had somehow managed to enter the second layer before them, but unfortunately, he was quickly knocked back to reality, bringing disgrace upon himself. As for Mu Chen's actions, Xun'er merely gave this evaluation. If that kid had stayed steady and positioned himself at the back, no one would have noticed him. But instead, he foolishly tried to seize first place, and now, the higher he climbed, the harder he would fall. Even the 9 Nether Sparrow clan would likely be laughed at because of this. However, Mo Feng is a tricky character. Xun'er's gaze flicked toward the distance, where crimson flames burned. Amidst the flames, Mo Feng's figure appeared faintly. Each time lightning struck, although it would temporarily halt Xun'er's movement, the thunder's power would be absorbed by the crimson flames, making it difficult for the lightning to cause much obstruction. Although Xun'er hadn't fought Mo Feng directly, he could sense that Mo Feng's danger was not inferior to the 9 Nether. If they truly fought, it would likely be troublesome. The rest should be able to reach the deepest part of the third layer, but beyond that, they will hit their limit. As thunder illuminated the sky, Xun'er's eyes flickered slightly. According to the information he had gathered, the first 3 layers of the body refining tower could be cleared easily, as long as one was well prepared. However, once reaching the path to the 4th layer, the elimination rate would become terrifyingly high. Only about half of those attempting to enter the 4th layer would succeed. However, Xun'er wasn't worried about this. With his strength, although he might face fierce competition for the top spot from the likes of Han Shan, Mo Feng, and others, he was confident in securing one of the half spots for entry to the 4th layer. Once we reach the 4th layer, let's see who can laugh until the end. My Heavenly Rock clan fears no challenge from anyone. Xun'er glanced toward the other figures flickering with spiritual light in the distance. The cold gleam flashed in his eyes, but he quickly dismissed it. He then accelerated his pace, and the golden feathers in front of him glowed, diverting the overwhelming thunderbolts descending from the sky. In the near future, Xun'er and the others should be able to reach the deepest part of the 3rd layer. This place is said to be extremely critical, as nearly half of the participants will be eliminated here. Outside the body refining tower, many people were watching the glowing barrier of the 3rd layer, discussing among themselves. Mu Chen still hasn't made any moves. If, after everyone else has reached the depths of the 3rd layer, he's still not in, he'll be eliminated directly. Some people sighed. Looking at the light points still lingering on the 2nd layer, it seemed that Mu Chen would soon be kicked out of the body refining tower due to elimination. On the other side, Lu Qing saw this and felt a sense of satisfaction. The guy didn't know his limits. He had charged so high earlier, but now, after falling down, not only had he lost face, but the Nine Nether Sparrow clan was also going to be embarrassed. Lu Qing turned to glance at Nine Nether, whose face remained calm, but her tightly clenched jade hands clearly revealed her inner worry. Once this guy gets completely eliminated, let's see what face you'll have left. Lu Qing sneered inwardly. While it was certain that nearly half of the participants would be eliminated soon, someone like Mu Chun, who hadn't even entered the third layer and was already being eliminated, was clearly the first. Beside Nine Nether, Mo Ling's small face was filled with worry. She understood that if Mu Chun were really eliminated now, the Nine Nether Sparrow clan would be ridiculed. And once this reached their clan, those old faces with pride would surely go mad. Nine Nether's sister, Nine Nether, didn't respond. Her gaze was fixed on the lone light point on the second layer. Even now, she still didn't believe that Mu Chun would stop at the second layer. As Nine Nether stared intently, her pupils suddenly contracted. That moment, she noticed the light point seemed to flicker rapidly in the endless frozen land, where the fierce wind howled and the chilling currents raged. On a lone peak, the thin figure of Mu Chun remained seated, still as a rock. SSHH. The gusts of wind cut through Mu Chun's body like sharp blades. Surprisingly, they didn't easily tear open any horrific wounds. His skin only slightly rippled, but then, under a faint golden light, it quickly healed. If one observed Mu Chun's body closely at this moment, they would notice a faint blue glow flowing beneath his skin. This glow emanated an intense coldness, a coldness that could instantly turn the body of a 6th grade supreme into frozen stone. However, within Mu Chun, this coldness seemed to pulse with vitality, slowly seeping into his flesh and blood, infusing him with a powerful force. On Mu Chun's face, the blue chill began to dissipate. The moment the chill completely vanished, his tightly closed eyes suddenly snapped open. In his black pupils, blue coldness gathered. The air ahead of him began to freeze into ice under his gaze. The crystal-like pattern flashed through his pupils. Whoosh! A wave of blue cold air surged from Mu Chun's throat, spreading outward. The harsh winds that had been sweeping toward him from all directions were instantly frozen upon contact with this cold air. Golden light burst forth from Mu Chun's body, and the coldness that had filled him vanished entirely, replaced by a warm, soothing sensation. It was as if the extreme cold of the world could no longer pose any obstacle to him. He slowly lowered his head, only to see that the true dragon mark, which had been coiled on his chest, not only swelled in size, but the dragon eye, which had only slightly opened before, began to stir again and slowly widened. Buzz! As the dragon eye opened, though only halfway, the sudden eruption of true dragon pressure caused the lone peak, where Mu Chun was seated, to crack with deep fissures. At the same time, the true phoenix mark on his back began to unfurl its phoenix wings halfway. The combined might of the dragon and phoenix swept through the air, and the lone peak could no longer bear the pressure. It finally collapsed completely as the cracks spread. The peak shattered, and Mu Chun stood in midair. His upper body bared, and spiritual energy ripples were visible around him. However, when the powerful gale that could shred a 6th grade supreme approached, it only left white marks on his skin's surface. His physical body had clearly undergone tremendous refinement during this period. He could even feel that the second layer of the dragon and phoenix body was within reach. However, there was no longer any way for his physical body to be further refined here. Is it finally over? Mu Chun slowly clenched his palm, feeling the almost explosive power within him. A satisfied smile appeared on his lips as he glanced toward the distant horizon. The others must be attempting to break through to the 4th layer by now, right? It seemed he needed to act with full force. If he were eliminated now, it would be an insult to the spot Nine Nether had granted him. Once this thought crossed his mind, Mu Chun no longer hesitated. He flicked his finger, and golden light erupted from his back, unfurling a pair of massive golden phoenix wings. Boom! With a flap of his wings, a violent wind erupted, tearing apart the surrounding gales. The swirling blue cold currents could no longer form any barrier. Mu Chun's figure almost instantly transformed into a blur, speeding out of this space at an unimaginable rate. The speed far exceeded that of Xun'er and the others by many times. At the moment Chen made his move, many of the strong individuals outside the body refining tower sensed the change. They quickly shifted their gazes and their faces froze in shock. Qing, who had previously worn a mocking expression, now had a stiff look on her face that a light screen hovered above the body refining tower. Within it, a glowing dot flickered rapidly, traveling at an unbelievably terrifying speed that in just a few minutes. It was approaching the barrier leading to the third layer. Around them, the strong individuals were left speechless, staring in disbelief at this scene. After a long while, their shock slowly turned into stunned exclamations. What is happening? Why has Chen's speed suddenly increased so much? Such terrifying speed. This has surpassed everyone else before. My God, he's already at the barrier leading to the third layer. Hiss, that speed. Shocked voices erupted from every side. All the powerful figures were dumbfounded, clearly not expecting Chen, who seemed on the verge of giving up before, to suddenly explode with such force. Several members of the Heavenly Rock clan stared at the light screen in fear, especially Qing, whose smug smile had long since frozen. Her eyes were fixed on the rapidly flashing, as though she wished she could devour it whole. Bastard, how is this possible? Qing's mind was in turmoil. Her face turned pale with fury, and she gritted her teeth, muttering, "This guy must have used some secret technique that IT can't last. There's no way he'll break through the barrier to the third layer with just this." However, just as her words fell, the exclamations around her rang out again. He broke through the barrier to the third layer. Unbelievable, his speed hasn't slowed down. Did the barrier have no effect on him at all? Above the light curtain, the light point that had rushed into the barrier leading to the third layer was still flickering wildly. And what made it even more astonishing was that its speed had not slowed down at all, and in fact, it seemed to be getting faster. The atmosphere outside the body refining tower seemed to have frozen. Even Qing merely opened her soft red lips slightly, as if she wanted to say something more, but the words got stuck in her throat, unable to come out. Her wide-eyed look appeared especially comical, and no matter how hard they tried to believe what was unfolding before them, they had no choice but to accept this somewhat cruel reality. At the deepest part of the third layer of the body refining tower, the space here seemed incredibly dim, with layers upon layers of black thunderclouds, as though the very sky was completely blocked. Thunderbolts, like massive flood dragons, tore through the sky, their terrifying power causing the very heavens and earth to tremble. Amidst this rampant thunder, several figures were standing in midair, the overwhelming spiritual light radiating from their bodies, dispersing the thunderbolts that continuously struck down. Xun'er, Han Shan, Mo Feng, and others were at the forefront, their gazes all fixed ahead. There, the thunderclouds seemed to have gathered into a massive cloud platform, approximately several tens of thousands of feet in size. Behind the platform, the space appeared fragmented, but one could still see countless rays of light streaking through the sky like meteors. As they watched the meteors, Xun'er and the others couldn't help but narrow their eyes because they could sense that within those meteoric lights, droplets of liquid shimmering with lightning were gathering. A powerful, pure, and violent force emanated from within. That's Thundermarrow. A look of greed appeared almost simultaneously on the faces of Xun'er and the others. Thundermarrow was a substance that only formed after the power of thunder and lightning in the world had been refined to a certain level. It possessed the miraculous effect of cleansing the marrow and bones, and could also refine the physical body. Its value was no less than that of blood spirit mud. The greedy expressions on Xun'er and the others gradually faded as they realized the Thundermarrow was behind the thundercloud platform. Clearly, to obtain it, they would have to pass through this thundercloud platform, and this was the barrier to the fourth layer. Only by breaking through here could they enter the fourth layer of the body refining tower. Xun'er and the others looked towards the rear of the thundercloud platform, where 5 thunderlight cushions, each about 10 feet in size, were glowing. As they looked at these 5 cushions, their eyes flickered, because they all knew that these 5 thunderlight cushions represented the spots available to enter the fourth layer. In other words, nearly half of the people on this thundercloud platform would be eliminated directly. This elimination rate was clearly brutal. However, Xun'er, Han Shan, Mo Feng, and the others all wore indifferent expressions. Though silent, a sense of confidence gathered among them. Clearly, they were all extremely confident in their own abilities, and they believed that at least one of those 5 spots would be theirs. Whoosh, whoosh. As Xun'er and the others waited quietly, there were occasional sounds of breaking air coming from the distant rear, followed by figures that appeared, looking somewhat disheveled as they slowly approached. These were the prodigies from various clans who had fallen slightly behind Xun'er and the others. When they saw the 5 thunder-like cushions on the thundercloud platform, their pupils shrank, and their expressions turned much more serious. Clearly, they all understood just how difficult it would be to obtain one of those 5 thunder-like cushions. In the thunderous, chaotic world, figures stood in midair, each keeping a significant distance from each other, clearly in mutual wariness. Xun'er's slightly closed eyes opened at this moment as he glanced at the number of people present. Then a faint smile appeared on his face. As expected, only 9 people had made it here, but it seemed that Chen from the 9 Nether Sparrow clan had indeed been eliminated. How laughable! Xun'er muttered softly, shaking his head as he decided not to pay much attention to these failures. His gaze swept over the others, and with a grin, he said, "Everyone, the time is almost up. Shall we enter this thunder platform together? As for who will succeed next, let's see who has the means." From the distance, Han Shan, Su Kuan, and the others nodded expressionlessly. Only Mo Feng furrowed his brows and glanced at the distant rear. He then let out a soft sigh. If Chen doesn't show up soon, he will likely be eliminated. Xun'er, seeing that no one else had any objections, smiled and stepped forward first. However, just as he was about to land on the thundercloud platform, his expression suddenly changed. He sharply turned his head, staring suspiciously at the distant rear. At the same time, Han Shan, Mo Feng, and the others' gazes also froze. In that instant, they all sensed an extremely powerful spiritual energy fluctuation coming from the rear. Someone else is coming. Feeling this fluctuation, everyone was shocked. Their gazes briefly interlocked, and then their hearts shuddered slightly. It's Chen. He's actually arrived at this time. A slight change appeared on Han Shan's indifferent face. He looked toward the distant rear and said in a deep voice, "What speed? Doesn't he fear the thunder here?" Clearly, he also sensed that the spiritual energy fluctuation was charging forward recklessly, as if completely unconcerned about being struck by lightning. Boom! Boom! As the thunderous sounds grew increasingly violent, in just a few dozen breaths, everyone saw a golden light tearing through the dim sky, roaring towards them. Thunderbolts fell from the sky, but when they struck the figure in the golden light, they only made his body tremble slightly. His speed, however, did not decrease in the slightest. Whoosh! In a flash of golden light, the figure finally appeared outside the thunder platform, and as the light dissipated, a young figure stood before all their gazes. As the golden light vanished, Chen stood in midair, looking at the figures who were watching him closely. He smiled faintly and said, "Sorry to have kept you waiting." He stepped on golden light, his body tall and slender. The golden light flowed over his skin. However, facing Chen, who came with the winds and thunder, even the powerful Xun'er and Han Shan had their gazes freeze. Clearly, they sensed a faint but undeniable aura of danger from him. This guy seemed stronger than before. Xun'er's face remained expressionless, but his hand involuntarily clenched. He could sense that Chen was not the same as before. Han Shan deeply scrutinized Chen, then swept his gaze across the others. "Now that everyone's here, let's begin. As for who can enter the 4th layer, it depends on each one's ability." His words fell, and without further hesitation, he moved, transforming into a light shadow and landing on the thundercloud platform. He stood there with his hands behind his back, but a faint aura of ferocity exploded around him, making one's heart race. Whoosh, whoosh. After Han Shan, the others immediately shot out and landed on the thundercloud platform, keeping a great distance from each other. Chen also landed on the thundercloud platform, his gaze flickering slightly. Judging by the situation, this trial leading to the 4th layer seemed to be a melee mode, no matter what. Only the last 5 standing on this platform would qualify for the 4th layer. Eliminating half, huh? Mu Chen muttered to himself, and soon spiritual light began to gather at his fingertips at the same time. Zhong Tang's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned his head, his gaze shifting toward another direction. There, a man in black robes was staring coldly at Mu Chen. This person was none other than the Thunder Crow clan's prodigy, who had previously fought Mu Chen and the others in the Meteor Belt. The black-robed man's gaze met Zhong Tang's for a moment, and it seemed as if they had come to some unspoken understanding. He immediately grinned coldly and took a step forward, heading straight toward Mu Chen. Mo Feng also noticed the Thunder Crow clan prodigy's movements and furrowed his brow, intending to stop him. But just as Mo Feng was about to act, a figure appeared before him, and Zhong Tang's smiling yet inscrutable face appeared in front of him. I've heard that Brother Mo is a standout among the younger generation of the 9 Nether Sparrow clan. It is an honor to meet you today. I hope you can teach me a thing or two. Mo Feng's eyes were ice cold as he glared at Zhong Tang, who had clearly intended to block him and give the Thunder Crow clan prodigy enough time to deal with Mu Chen. Do you think stopping me will allow you to deal with Mu Chen? Don't be so naive. Mo Feng sneered. Is that so? Zhong Tang, hearing this, smiled non-committally and said lightly, there's no time to set up a spirit array. What's a 6th grade supreme even worth? He slightly tilted his head, casting a glance at the black-robed man who had appeared in front of Mu Chen, a cold smile flashing in his eyes. This kid had desperately caught up, but it seemed likely that he would be the first to be eliminated from the competition. That it was rather laughable. In fact, as Mu Chen and the others stepped onto the Thundercloud platform leading to the 4th layer, a radiant glow began to gather outside the body refining tower, eventually transforming into a massive light curtain. Inside the curtain, every brick and stone of the Thundercloud platform was projected clearly for all to see. Outside the body refining tower, the tense gazes of the onlookers immediately shifted toward the enormous light curtain. Everyone knew that half of the participants would be eliminated on this Thundercloud platform, and only the final 5 standing would have the qualification to enter the 4th layer of the body refining tower. The elimination rate was, to say the least, quite shocking to this point. The crowd gradually recovered from the initial shock brought on by Mu Chen's earlier explosive display. However, curious and peculiar glances were still cast at the slender, youthful figure projected within the light curtain. Lu Qing's face was pale, her silver teeth gritted tightly. She could never have imagined that the human boy would suddenly unleash such terrifying potential at the last moment, catching up after being so far behind. Earlier, Mu Chen had charged forward with an unstoppable momentum, and even Lu Qing now felt a slight tremor in her heart. She had to admit, despite her initial judgment, Mu Chen clearly had the kind of unexpected strength that had earned him a spot with the 9 Nether Sparrow clan, allowing him to enter the Divine Beast Plains. She had really misjudged him, and her pride had taken quite a hit. This guy is really insane. He managed to catch up. One of the Heavenly Rock clan experts beside Lu Qing's side, still finding it hard to believe. Lu Qing's pale face slowly regained some color as she took a deep breath. He's certainly full of surprises, but no matter what tricks he has up his sleeve, the real challenge begins now. And now that he's revealed his expertise in spirit arrays, no one will give him enough time to set one up. Without his spirit arrays, any of the prodigies on the Thundercloud platform will be able to defeat him easily. Aside from Mu Chen, the other 9 participants were all genuine 6th grade supremes, their combat abilities further amplified by the power of their divine beasts. In such a scenario, Mu Chen was clearly the lamb among wolves. Furthermore, after losing the initiative with his spirit arrays, he would no longer be able to intimidate others. That it was clear that no one would allow him the time to set up his arrays. The experts of the Heavenly Rock clan around them nodded in agreement. Regardless of the mysterious method Mu Chen had used to catch up with the others, the upcoming trials would depend entirely on his true strength. And obviously, they didn't think Mu Chen, having lost the advantage of his spirit arrays, could be one of the final 5. Just as they were discussing, surprised murmurs suddenly rose from the crowd, and the strong figures turned their attention to see the Thunder Crow clan prodigy, Lu Sui, appearing in front of Mu Chen. It's Lu Sui from the Thunder Crow clan. It seems like he's going after Mu Chen. This guy is strong, even stronger than Xun'er from the Heavenly Rock clan. And now that Mu Chen has revealed his spirit arrays, this battle could turn disastrous for him. That might be speaking too soon. Who knows if Mu Chen has any other hidden cards? From his previous actions, it doesn't seem like he's a reckless person that if he dared to enter the body refining tower with the strength of a 6th grade supreme, he must have something up his sleeve. As Lu Sui from the Thunder Crow clan appeared in front of Mu Chen, the crowd outside the body refining tower began to murmur, but after witnessing Mu Chen's numerous incredible reversals, no one dared to easily make a final judgment. Lu Sui was indeed strong, but Mu Chen was equally unpredictable. It seems like you won't have time to set up your spirit array now. As the chatter continued from the crowd outside, on the Thundercloud platform, Lu Sui stood before Mu Chen, flashing a grin that revealed his sharp, white teeth, radiating a chilling aura. Mu Chen stared at Lu Sui in front of him, his brow slightly furrowing. Soon, the spiritual light in his hands began to dissipate. It seemed that his earlier display of the spirit array had made these people wary of him. This time, they weren't even willing to give him a moment's respite. Lu Sui, who appeared to be standing casually, was radiating an immense surge of spiritual power from beneath his feet. Mu Chen could sense that the spiritual seals he had set up on the ground earlier were being shattered one by this overwhelming force. With this, the spiritual array seals were flawed, making the array unstable. Attempting to force it would only waste spiritual energy with minimal effect. Rather than continuing, Mu Chen decided to forego using the array. What's this? Not going to use your spirit array? Lu Sui's face twisted into a mocking grin when he saw Mu Chen's actions that to him. Giving up the array was like cutting off one's own arms. Sometimes using other methods is a lot more fun, Mu Chen replied with a smile, his hands clasped together as he felt the terrifying power flowing through his blood and flesh. Lu Sui's mocking smile grew darker, and with a cold tone, he pointed toward the arena's edge and said, "You might still have time to leave now, but if you die here, no one will even bother to collect your body." However, Mu Chen only smiled at him, his gaze filled with such disdain that it immediately sparked intense fury in Lu Sui. The way Mu Chen looked at him felt like he was nothing more than a fool. "You're asking for death." The killing intent surged within Lu Sui. Without another word, he stomped his foot violently, and an incredibly violent wave of spiritual power erupted from his body. The power was so vast that it even crackled with lightning, accompanied by the thunderous roar of the sky, as if resonating with the fury of the heavens. A crushing pressure began to emanate from Lu Sui's body. Mu Chen, feeling the pressure, couldn't help but be a little surprised. It seemed that the Thunder Crow clan had an extraordinary resonance with the thunderous forces of nature. The spiritual energy within Lu Sui's body contained traces of lightning power, making the energy feel chaotic and violent. "I'll be curious to see what you can do with your mere 6th grade supreme strength. Now that you've given up your spirit array," Lu Sui said with killing intent. In the next instant, a deafening thunderclap rang out, and his figure turned into a streak of lightning, dashing toward Mu Chen. His speed was so fast it seemed like a flash of light, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared before Mu Chen in midair. Boom! Lu Sui's face was grim as he looked down at Mu Chen. He then slapped down with immense force. In the center of his palm, countless bolts of lightning gathered, and the strike, though seemingly light, carried nearly destructive power. Great thunder gathering hand. With a single strike, it was as if thousands of bolts of lightning converged, a blow that could obliterate the heavens. The lightning flickered in Mu Chen's pupils as he looked at Lu Sui, who was descending with the violent power of thunder. His eyes flashed slightly. Lu Sui's strength was clearly much stronger than Xun'er's, and no wonder he was a prodigy of the Thunder Crow clan. He was definitely not to be underestimated. However, facing this furious strike, Mu Chen didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. Instead, there was a burning battle intent in his eyes. He could feel his blood and flesh trembling with excitement, as if they were eager for the fight. After enduring the trials of the body refining tower's 3 layers, the strength within his body had become incredibly powerful. Now, he was desperately in need of a fierce battle to let his blood and flesh fully integrate with the power inside him. Mu Chen licked his lips, and a brilliant golden light erupted from within him. His bones seemed to tremble, and in the midst of that, there was a faint sound of dragon and phoenix cries resounding through his body. Boom! His blood and chi surged, and the power within him could no longer be suppressed. Without hesitation, Mu Chen stomped his foot hard and shot toward Lu Sui, charging directly at him. "You're asking for death." Seeing Mu Chen's daring approach, Lu Sui's face twisted into a savage expression. His strike was one that even ordinary 6th grade Supremes, not to mention those newly advancing into 7th grade Supreme strength, wouldn't dare to clash with head dash on Datio Lu Sui. Mu Chen's actions were nothing short of suicidal. Die. He grinned savagely, and in the palm of his hand, the endless thunder he had gathered suddenly became incredibly violent. The booming sound of thunder was so intense it shook the heavens, with lightning crackling around his hand, which seemed to swell hundreds of times, resembling a colossal, thunderous mountain. He then slammed it down directly at the charging Mu Chen. Whoosh! Mu Chen's ghostly figure appeared in midair as he looked up at the thunderous hand descending like a giant thunder mountain, and took a deep breath that a purple-golden dragon pattern slithered up to his fist and coiled around it. The true dragon mark stretched out its claws, perfectly matching Mu Chen's 5 fingers. The purple-gold dragon scales shimmered, releasing an overwhelming power at that moment. The palm and the dragon claw seemed to merge perfectly. An indescribable force erupted from Mu Chen's hand, a power so fierce that even he himself was startled by it. With the recent advancements in his physical body, Mu Chen gradually began to realize that the power of the dragon phoenix body was slowly being unlocked within him. This punch is called the true dragon fist. The veins on his hand, now covered by the dragon claws, throbbed like twisting dragon tendrils. He lifted his head and gazed at the rapidly expanding thunderous mountain of a thunder hand in his eyes. Through the lightning, he could almost see Lu Sui's grim face. The latter seemed to be savoring the victory of annihilating him with a single strike. But unfortunately, it seemed that wouldn't happen as he wished. Mu Chen smiled and, without hesitation, punched forward. The purple-golden dragon scales on his fist glinted as it shot forward, carrying an immense weight and crashing heavily into the massive thunder hand. With the punch, the space itself shattered,